I've spent the last 4 months trying to forget what happened. Trying to convince myself it wasn't real. That it was just a moment, a week, blurred line drawn in the dark. But it was real. And now, every time I close my eyes, I feel it again. His breath on my neck. His hands so careful, like he'd memorized every inch of me before ever touching me. The way he said my name. Not mom. Not ma'am. Just me. I never thought I'd tell anyone this. God, I swore I'd take it to my grave. But silence feels like a sickness. And maybe this is the only way to breathe again. My name is Celia. I'm 49. I've been married to Marcus for 17 years. And for the last 5 of them, I've felt like a ghost in my own house. Marcus isn't a bad man. He's reliable. Provides. He still kisses my cheek in the mornings and makes sure the back door is locked every night. But he hasn't really looked at me in a long time. Not like he did. It started after Jordan moved back home, Marcus's son from a previous marriage. He was 26, quiet, a bit brooding in that way that made people unsure how to speak to him. But with me, he was always respectful, careful, kind. At first, it was small things, offering to carry in groceries, asking me if I needed help fixing the garden lights. He noticed the little things Marcus never saw anymore. Like the way my hands trembled when I was anxious. Or how I always folded the laundry before it finished cooling, because I liked the warmth. But I told myself it was nothing. Just gratitude. Just attention I wasn't used to anymore. I wasn't looking for anything. I had given up looking. Until one night. I couldn't stop. It had been raining. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV humming low. Jordan came in from the garage, his shirt clinging to him, soaked through from unloading something in the rain. I told him he'd catch a cold. He smiled, not the kind you throw out of politeness. A real one. Warm. Then he looked at me. Not just at me, but into me. And I froze. Because for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as Marcus's wife. Not as Jordan's stepmother. As a woman. A breathing, lonely, aching woman. I didn't act on it. Not that night. But something in me cracked. I started noticing him more, his voice when he asked if I'd eaten, his laugh when I finally said something sarcastic. The way he lingered in the kitchen a few seconds longer than necessary. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. And I hated myself for how much it thrilled me. The guilt? It came in tidal waves. But the ache? That stayed. It pulsed in the quiet moments. It whispered when Marcus turned away in bed. It screamed in the silence after Jordan said goodnight, and I stood at the sink gripping the counter, wishing I could go back to before I knew how it felt to be wanted again. I didn't plan for it to happen. And I sure as hell didn't plan for it to feel like this. I'm not writing this for sympathy. Or forgiveness. I'm writing this because the weight of that night is still living in my bones. And if I don't let it out, even in words, I'm afraid I'll forget who I used to be before one forbidden touch reminded me I was still alive. And if I'm honest, that night wasn't the biggest mistake of my life. The biggest mistake was pretending, every day since, that it didn't change everything. I remember the exact moment it shifted. It was late September, and the heat hadn't quite left the air yet. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of those soft old t-shirts Marcus hated. He said it made me look tired, older. But it was comfortable. It felt like me. I had my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea when Jordan walked in. He had just gotten back from a run. His skin was flushed, breath still heavy. Sweat clung to his collarbone and jawline like glitter. And something in the way he looked at me still, focused, quiet, felt like being touched without contact. Couldn't sleep? He asked, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. I nodded, my voice caught somewhere behind my ribs. You. He shrugged. Running helps me forget things. He didn't say what things. And I didn't ask. Because deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. We stood there in silence. And it wasn't awkward. It was electric. Heavy. I felt his eyes drift down to my bare legs and back up again, slowly, deliberately, not like a man ogling a woman, but like someone seeing something he shouldn't want and daring himself to look anyway. That was the moment. The glance. Just one. But I felt it like lightning. No words, no touch. But something real passed between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of something neither of us could name yet. Something simmering. Something dangerous. I told myself I was imagining it. That I'd misread him. That I was projecting, hungry for attention after years of being invisible. But when I turned away to refill my tea, I saw him in the reflection of the glass cabinet, still watching me. His jaw tight. His expression unreadable. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just me. Something had shifted. And once you notice that shift, you can't pretend not to see it. After that night, I started avoiding him, at least consciously. I cooked faster. I left rooms sooner. I kept my eyes on my book when he entered, even when every part of me strained to look up. But he didn't make it easy. He started coming home earlier, lingering in the kitchen when I cooked, asking me small questions that sounded innocent. What spices I used, how I learned to trim the roses just right, but felt intimate when he asked them. His voice was always low when we were alone. Softer somehow. And I noticed everything. The way he leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest, watching me like I was a puzzle. The way his eyes flicked to my mouth when I spoke. The way he always said my name, not ma'am, not mom, just Celia. The first time he said it like that, I dropped the knife I was chopping with. It clattered against the cutting board, loud in the stillness. He moved fast, grabbing it, our hands brushing. We both froze. His hands stayed close, just long enough to be deliberate. And when I looked up at him, I swear the air left the room. His eyes weren't boyish. They weren't confused. They were certain. There was no teasing, no curiosity, just heat. Quiet and steady. It scared the hell out of me, because it had been so long since someone looked at me like that, like I was a door he wanted to open slowly, reverently, knowing exactly what was on the other side. I yanked my hand away and laughed. It came out brittle. Thanks. Clumsy me. He didn't smile. He didn't say a word. He just watched me as I turned away and pretended to be fine. But inside, something deep, ancient, and feminine had been stirred. That glance, just that one glance, made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Desire. Not just his. Mine. And for the first time in my marriage. I didn't want to be good. It was a Thursday night. Funny how something so ordinary can carry the weight of everything that came after. Marcus had gone out of town for a work retreat. He kissed me goodbye in the driveway, distracted as always, more worried about traffic than the warmth of my lips. I watched him drive away from the porch with that familiar emptiness pooling in my chest. Later that night, the house felt too quiet. Jordan stayed in his room most of the evening, but I heard him moving soft footsteps, music humming low under the door. I poured myself a glass of red wine, something dry and dark, and sat alone in the living room with an old blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I tried reading. I tried watching something. I tried pretending I was content. But I wasn't. I was lonely. I was restless. And I was tired of pretending. It was around 10:30 when I heard the stairs creak behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. His presence filled the room before his body did. Couldn't sleep either? I asked without looking. Nope. His voice was quiet. Mind if I sit? I nodded, still facing the television, though I couldn't have told you what was on. He sat on the other end of the couch. Not close. But not far either. The silence between us stretched dense and loaded. I took another sip of wine. My throat felt too tight for anything else. He spoke first. You always look so sad when you think no one's watching. My hand paused midair, glass halfway to my lips. I turned. What? He was already looking at me, gaze steady and unafraid. You don't even realize it, do you? How much of yourself you're holding in. I wanted to lie. To deflect. But his words hit something too raw. I don't remember the last time someone asked how I felt, I whispered. Jordan didn't reply right away. He just nodded, like he'd known that all along. And then he said it. So quietly I almost missed it. You deserve more than this. The words slid over me like silk and shattered glass. I had spent so long convincing myself that this half-life, This invisible ache was enough. That wanting more was selfish. That I was too old for longing, too married for desire. But when he said it, I believed it. He shifted closer. His thigh brushed mine. I didn't move. His voice lowered. Celia, just my name. But it carried heat, guilt, temptation, everything I had been trying to drown for weeks. I turned to face him. And then, I stopped thinking. His mouth found mine before I even knew I'd leaned in. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was soft, reverent, like he had imagined this moment 1,000 times and wanted to get it right. My fingers curled into his shirt. His hand cupped the side of my face. I should have stopped it. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like Marcus's wife. I didn't feel like Jordan's stepmother. I felt like a woman seen, desired, alive. We broke apart, breathless. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. But I couldn't. Because every cell in my body was screaming for more. Please, I said, my voice barely there. Don't. That was all it took. The blanket slipped from my shoulders as he laid me back gently, slowly, as if afraid I'd change my mind. But I didn't. His hands moved with careful reverence, learning me, mapping me like he'd always known I was his to study. And I let him. Every kiss was a revelation. Every touch was a confession I hadn't dared speak aloud. By the time we reached the end of each other, I wasn't crying, but I wasn't whole either. Because I knew something had happened that couldn't be undone. Something too deep to explain, too real to forget. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, wrapped in his arms, listening to the thunderstorm outside and wondering how I'd face myself in the morning. The sun rose too gently that morning. It filtered in through the sheer curtains like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't shifted beneath me just hours before. But I knew better. I was still in my robe, the tie crooked around my waist, the fabric clinging in places it shouldn't. My hair smelled faintly of him. My lips felt raw, kissed more deeply in one night than they had been in years of marriage. The space beside me was empty. Jordan had left before I opened my eyes. Maybe he thought it would be easier that way. Maybe he was right. But that didn't stop the hollow ache in my chest when I rolled toward the pillow where his head had rested just hours ago. I could still feel the warmth. My body didn't feel violated. It didn't feel used. It felt awakened. Touched like it mattered. Like every curve, every soft place that time had changed, had been worthy of worship. Of desire. But my mind? That was another story. I walked to the bathroom on autopilot, washed my face, brushed my teeth, stared at the woman in the mirror with bloodshot eyes and kiss-swollen lips. Who is she? A wife. A stepmother. A traitor. A woman who had let her husband's son take her apart in the dark and hadn't stopped him. And worse, a woman who wanted to feel it again. Downstairs, the house was quiet. I made coffee the way I always did, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, stirring out of habit more than want. My hands trembled. I told myself it was the caffeine. I didn't hear Jordan come in from the back door until he cleared his throat. I turned, the ceramic mug almost slipping from my fingers. He stood there, still damp from a morning run, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. His eyes held mine, and I saw everything in them. Regret. Fear. And something deeper. Something I couldn't name without breaking all over again. Morning, he said. Like we hadn't shattered the rules of this house just hours before. Like we were still 2 people who belonged in the same room. Hi, I said, barely more than a breath. He didn't come closer. Didn't reach for me. Just stood there, chewing on the inside of his cheek like he was trying to decide what he could say that wouldn't make it worse. We should talk, he said. I nodded. But I didn't move. I was afraid if I did, I'd fall apart. I shouldn't have, he started, but I cut him off. Don't. His eyes flicked up, startled. Don't pretend it was a mistake, I whispered. Because we both know it wasn't. He took a slow breath. But it was wrong. I laughed then. Not from amusement. From the unbearable pressure in my chest. Wrong, I echoed, stepping back. Yes. Of course it was wrong. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real. The words hung between us, thick with truth. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, his voice lower now. You didn't, I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. That's the problem. Because it hadn't felt like a mistake. It had felt like the first time someone touched me with intention. Not out of routine. Not out of marital duty. But with reverence. With hunger. With care. And now I couldn't unknow that feeling. I should go shower, I said, needing to move, needing to break the moment before it swallowed us again. He nodded. Celia, I turned. But he didn't finish the sentence. Because we both knew no apology could make it clean. And no denial could make it disappear. I stood under the water for too long, letting it run hot until my skin turned pink and raw. I scrubbed. I wept. But no amount of soap could undo the way his touch had changed me. And as the steam curled around the tiles and fogged the mirror again, I looked at my reflection and knew something terrifying. I wasn't sorry. Not for what I'd done. Only for what would come next. I avoided him after that. I told myself it was the right thing to do, the only thing. We had made a mistake, one that couldn't happen again. One that could destroy everything. So I folded myself back into the routine of being Marcus's wife. I smiled when I needed to. I cooked the same meals. I laughed at the same dry jokes. I let Marcus touch me at night when he remembered to, and I closed my eyes and tried not to compare his hands to someone else's. But pretending is exhausting. And Jordan? He didn't make it easy. He wasn't pushy. He didn't corner me or whisper things when no one was looking. He was careful. Respectful. But that didn't stop the way he looked at me. Those eyes, God, those eyes, they held me like a secret, like a promise he refused to let go of. And every time we crossed paths in the hallway, or the kitchen, or the garage, my heart reacted like it remembered something my body was trying to forget. There was this one moment, about a week after that night. I was unloading the dishwasher, still in my work clothes, black slacks, blouse clinging a little too tightly after the heat of the day. Jordan walked in from the back deck, shirtless, towel slung over his shoulder, hair damp from the outdoor shower. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. But I felt him pause behind me. Not close, just near enough that I could sense him, like heat before a flame. Did you mean it? He asked softly. I froze. My fingers curled around a glass too tightly. Mean what? That it wasn't a mistake. I turned, finally, and faced him. His expression wasn't cocky or expectant. He looked uncertain, like he needed to hear it to breathe right again. And I hated him a little for asking. Yes, I said quietly. But meaning it doesn't make it right. He nodded, jaw tight. No. But it doesn't make it go away either. He walked past me then, and the edge of his towel brushed my arm. It was the smallest touch. But it burned all the same. I started finding excuses to leave the house more. Grocery runs I didn't need. Visits to friends I hadn't seen in years. Yoga classes. Volunteer shifts. Anything to avoid being alone in a house where the walls remembered more than I wanted them to. Marcus didn't notice the change. He never noticed much anymore. I think that was what hurt most. Not the guilt. Not the silence. But the fact that my husband was so emotionally absent that I could be falling apart in front of him, and he'd just ask if I remembered to buy more coffee. One night, I came home late from the store. The lights were off. I slipped off my heels at the door, tiptoed inside, and found Jordan in the kitchen, sitting at the counter in the dark, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up when I entered. The light from the fridge spilled across his face. You always run away like this, he asked quietly. I swallowed. I'm not running. Yes, you are. From me. From yourself. My voice cracked. What do you want me to say, Jordan? That I think about it every night? That I can still feel your hands on me when I lie in bed next to your father? That I'm scared if I let you touch me again, I won't be able to stop. Silence. Heavy and thick. He stood then, slow and steady, and walked toward me. I didn't back away. I should have. But I didn't. He stopped just short of touching me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. You're already not stopping, he whispered. I looked up at him, heart pounding in my throat. I can't be who you want me to be, I whispered. I don't want you to be anything, he said. Except honest. He stepped back and walked away, disappearing down the hall. And I stood there in the glow of the refrigerator light, breathless, shaking, furious. Because the truth? I was already his. Even if I never touched him again. I always thought I was a good liar. Or maybe I just believed no one was looking close enough to catch me. But Marcus had started to look again. Not at me the way he used to, not with hunger or tenderness, but with suspicion. Quiet questions. Lingering glances. Moments where his eyes lingered too long, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't realized was there. The shift was subtle at first. He'd ask where I'd been, even though I'd only gone to the grocery store. He'd make offhand comments about how quiet the house had been. He started calling me at odd times during the day, just to check in. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel it, tightening between us like a rope slowly pulled. And Jordan? He felt it too. He'd grown distant again, but not in the way I'd hoped. It wasn't avoidance. It was restraint. Control. He never lingered in the same room too long when Marcus was home, never looked at me directly. But I felt him. Always. Like a shadow stitched into the walls of my skin. One evening, about a month after that night, Marcus came home early from work. I was folding laundry in the living room, Jordan's t-shirts still warm from the dryer when my husband walked in. He stood in the doorway for a second too long, watching me. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, voice light, but his eyes too sharp. I smiled carefully. "Just trying to get ahead on chores." He nodded, but didn't move. "You've been different lately." I folded a towel slowly. Different how? I don't know. Distant. Restless. He paused. "Is everything okay between us?" And just like that, my chest caved in. Because how could I answer that? How do you tell your husband that you feel like a shell of the woman you used to be? That you've spent years waiting to be seen, touched, heard, and when you finally were, it came from the one person it never should have? Instead, I said the only thing I could. "I'm just tired." He nodded again, jaw flexing, lips twitching with something he swallowed down. "Do you ever think about us? About where we are now?" I hesitated. "All the time." That seemed to hurt him more than if I'd said never. He walked to the kitchen, opened a beer, leaned against the counter. His silence was louder than any scream. I thought it would end there. But then, late that night, I walked past his office door, half closed, lights still on, and I heard my name. Jordan's voice. I froze. "I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I didn't notice the change, Dad," he was saying. "She's not happy." Marcus's voice followed, tight and low. "What the hell do you know about her happiness?" "I know more than you think." I felt my knees buckle. Marcus sounded tired. "You don't get to judge our marriage. You're a guest in this house." "I'm not a kid anymore," Jordan shot back. "And maybe that's the problem, you think she doesn't need anything because she's quiet. But that silence is screaming." I pressed my back to the hallway wall, heart in my throat. My stomach twisted. Marcus didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "Is there something going on between you two?" Silence. "Please, please no," I thought. Jordan's voice came, lower now. "Would you believe me if I said no?" "Depends on how long I've been blind," Marcus muttered. A beat passed. Then I heard the scrape of a chair and the soft sound of retreating footsteps. I ducked into the shadows as Jordan stepped out, his face pale, jaw tight. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, and chose not to look. I stayed frozen there, breath shallow, as Marcus's office door clicked shut again. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside Marcus, his arm draped over me like it used to mean something. And all I could think was that everything was unraveling. Fast. Not just my marriage, but my control. My silence. The life I had convinced myself was enough. Because Marcus was finally looking now. But it was too late. Someone else had already seen me. There's something about silence that feels heavier once the truth has been touched. After that night, the night I overheard them talking, nothing felt safe anymore. Not the kitchen. Not the marriage bed. Not even the mirror. I kept waiting for Marcus to confront me. But he didn't. He didn't ask what Jordan meant. He didn't press me with accusations or demand the truth. Instead, he became careful. Too careful. The kind of careful that comes from a man trying to pretend what he knows deep down isn't real. He started bringing me flowers again, touching my lower back when he passed behind me, making dinner reservations I didn't ask for, looking at me like he was trying to see something he'd long forgotten to search for. But it was too late. Because once you've been seen, truly seen, you can't go back to being invisible. Jordan didn't speak to me directly after that. Not in any way that meant something. He avoided the kitchen if I was in it. Left for runs before I woke up. Came home late and stayed in his room. But the air between us? It was thick with memory. When I passed him in the hallway, my skin lit up in places he'd once touched. When I heard his voice from another room, it twisted something low in my stomach. Every moment of distance was louder than any closeness we'd ever had. One afternoon, I found him in the garage, elbows deep in the engine of Marcus's car. Sweat clung to his temples and grease streaked his forearms. He looked up, startled, when he saw me in the doorway. I just needed to grab something, I said, gesturing vaguely toward a shelf I didn't actually need anything from. He nodded, wiping his hands on a towel, but didn't speak. I walked past him, my hand brushing a socket wrench, just to feel the weight of something real in my palm. Something ordinary. Something that didn't burn. "You haven't said anything," I finally whispered. He didn't look at me. "What's there to say?" "That night," I said. "I don't regret it. But I can't carry it alone anymore." He set the wrench down slowly. His shoulders were tense. "Do you think I regret it?" I stepped closer. My voice shook. "I don't know what you feel. You've shut me out." His gaze met mine then. Intense. Steady. Raw. "I shut you out because I don't know how to want you and walk away." My breath caught. "I don't know how to pretend it didn't mean anything," he continued. "But I also don't want to be the reason your life falls apart." I stood there, the air between us thick with everything we hadn't dared say. "My life already fell apart," I said. "Long before you." That was the truth. Jordan didn't break me. He just saw the cracks. And then, he traced them. I didn't leave Marcus. Not that night. Not even that month. But something between us had changed irreversibly. I stopped trying to be the wife he wanted. And he stopped pretending he didn't see what was gone. We started sleeping back to back. He worked longer hours. I stopped asking where he went. It wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a quiet agreement. Stay for the image, stay for the guilt, stay because unraveling it would hurt more people than it helped. But my heart? It had already left. Jordan moved out in early spring. Said he needed his own space. A new start. He didn't say goodbye with words. He hugged me tightly in the driveway, lingering a second too long, like his arms remembered more than they should. Then he pulled back and looked me in the eyes. Just one look. And I felt everything all over again. That night, that touch, that breathless ache of being seen. It's been 7 months since he left. We don't talk. But sometimes I'll hear a certain song on the radio, or I'll walk through a grocery aisle and see the brand of coffee he used to drink, and it all comes back. Not with pain. With longing. Not the kind that wants to relive it. The kind that knows it changed you. Because he did. He knew my body better than my husband ever did. But more than that, he knew my silence. He heard the ache I never said aloud. He touched the woman buried beneath 1,000 rolls. And for one night, he loved her free.